Welcome, viewers, to the final call. And today we are going to be talking about Enoch. It says, he waited on God. You understand me? It says Enoch was a holy man. He served God with singleness. He spent a lot of time in solitude, which he devoted to reflection and prayer. So we must have time where we set ourselves apart from everybody and everything. And we go into reflection and prayer and deep meditation. That is when God will tell you about yourself. That's when God will tell you that he don't like this thing about you. Or this thing has to go. Or this person must leave. Or this place must be moved from. That is when, because why? You have come to seek his face. It's not the television and the social media and your mom talking and your dad talking and your children talking and your friends. No. Go in your closet and close the door. Leave your phone outside and leave all the worldly mess and noise and close the door. And be still so he can hear and you can hear him and he can hear you. Sometimes the Lord is talking to us and we're moving around. We've got earphones on, listen to our music and the Lord's voice can't be heard. Why? Because his voice is a still, small voice. You won't hear it above all the crowd of the world unless you take everything off and you start to be still. Some of us live in social media. I don't want them near me. I write everything down the old-fashioned way. I don't want all the electrical currents and the chemical energy that come from these things. You understand me? I write the old-fashioned way. I take my Bible and I take my books and I write. And that way, nothing is working on me. No chemical energy, no high frequency, no, nothing. I'm in a quiet space in my room or in my living room in total silence. Maybe like 2-3 o'clock in the morning before the day has started. There's no noise. I can hear everything that he's saying plain as day. I'm not doing it in the middle of the day when the kids are running and outside people are walking around. Everybody's, no. I get out from my bed. That's what the Bible says. Christ met God. It says many hours from day. That's when he went to meet his father. The Bible says many hours from day. Then he went to seek his father's face. Didn't say he met father's face in the middle of all the noise and confusion. No, you can't hear anything then. You've got to get out from your bed. You've got to learn to get out from your bed. And get up early when it's yet dark. And seek the face of God. The best hours I always say is from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Unless you're a warfare officer where you do 12 to 3. But if it's to seek the face of God, I'm telling you, do it on the hours of God's hours, 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. I'm telling you, we must learn to not love sleep. We must learn to get out of our bed and seek the face of God. It says he waited before God and prayed to know the will of God more perfectly that he might perform it. You see, he waited before God. He didn't rush out before he got the instructions and moved on his own thinking. He waited on God, and sometimes God doesn't talk immediately. Sometimes God can be weeks before he answers. Yeah, he doesn't do that with me, but with some people, I can hear from the Lord immediately. But some people, it will be weeks before he answers. You understand me? And so he waited on God and prayed until he knew the will of God so he could do what? Perform it more perfectly. So the will of God, to do the will of God was his meat and drink. That was what he lived for, to do the will of God. It said he separated himself from the corrupt descendants of Cain. You see, because the Canaanites, the Cain people were down in the valley and the people of Seth. So after Abel died and Cain was driven away, Adam had a son called Seth, and these people were called the Sethites. And this was the generation of the righteous men of God. You understand? And so Enoch was coming from that generation of righteous men. And they went to live in the mountain because they didn't want to stay next to the ungodly inhabitants of Cain. But the problem was that the inhabitants of Cain had some very beautiful women. The lineage of Seth. Seth's lineage was called the sons of God. And the sons of men was Cain's lineage. All right? So Cain was the bad ones, and the sons of God were the good ones. So Seth was where the line of God started after Abel died, and Cain was there. But the daughters of Cain were very beautiful, and the sons of Seth came down to the valley and started getting involved with these daughters of Cain, and that is where the problem started. That is where the immorality started spreading across the whole world. And then eventually the sons of Seth became apostatized as they married now the daughters of Cain, and the whole thing went off. And that's how the world got corrupted. So Enoch was preaching not only to the sons of Seth's generation going down unto the flood, but he also preaching to the people of Cain. He would go down to the valley and he would preach to them. Some would listen, some would turn back, and some wouldn't. But the problem was, he was having the same problem that we're going to have. We're going to meet the world in its atrocities, in its unbelief, mocking us, making fun of us, as we see every day. Okay? That they don't believe in God. Mention Jesus and they want to make fun of you. They want to, arrest you. They want to throw you out of places. And even in the church, if you start to talk about Christ too much, they'll be like, who are you? You're so self-righteous. Even the church, if you now talk about church with love and passion, people get, if you preach a sermon that is too straight, even the very bishop will come and tell you, oh no, we don't say those things in here because, we don't want to scatter the people. Sorry? If we're not going to preach Christ in his holiness and his right, then what is the purpose of the church? What is the purpose of the church? We're not keeping people in the church because of tithe and offerings. We're supposed to save them. That's the reason why we are preaching. We're preaching to convert people back to godliness, not for tithe and offering. And not so we can build houses and land and cars with the money of tithe. No, that is not what God sent us to do. God says, preach the gospel so the world would know that there's not only a judgment, but there's a savior that can save. So if we're doing it for any other reason, then we are guilty. We're not working for Christ with the right motive at all. So it says he reproved them faithfully, and some turned back and began to worship God. All right? And he also separated himself from the descendants of Cain because he was afraid that their sinfulness would rub off on him. He didn't want to get corrupted, so he only stayed down there a little bit. He didn't mingle with them. So when it comes to saving the ungodly, do not stay among them. Do your work and get out. So if you have to enter a pub or a wine bar or a ungodly place to save somebody, don't go and stay there till you start drinking and till this thing overtakes you. Because if you're not strong, there's some places that you cannot go and do a ministry. You can't. Because the sin of Satan will open doors, and before you know it, you'll be sucked in like a Hoover sucks you up. If you're not strong, you cannot go in certain places. I remember when I used to do drug, rehabilitation, and I used to go to the ghettos of Ghana. I used to go into the box where the drug addicts were making their, with their little gold, silver paper. I don't know what they're doing. They sprinkle something and then they burn it with fire, what they were doing there. And I used to be taking them out. I used to bring them out of the box, and the pastors would be like, no, we're not going in there. I said, I'm going in there. And I used to go in there, right? And I would take them out. Because why? And then one day, one of them came and said to me, why don't I try it? And I said, get thee behind me, Satan. You cannot convince me to give myself to this rubbish. You understand me? I will not get involved with drugs and drinking and sex and smoking. You understand me? And so the fear of God was in me, because why? I saw it when I was growing up. And I was like, I proportioned myself that I would never be, those things would never have the power over me of drinking and smoking and sexing. No. I determined that was never going to be my life. That's why as a child, I determined that I was going to serve the Lord from a very young age. Thank God I heard him at the age of 3. But by the age of 8, I was going looking for him. I was like, Lord, I need to be with you, because I saw the corruption. I was raised in corruption. So I saw it. So as an adult, I was not going to be enticed by it. That's why I said, Satan, get thee behind me. That is never going to become my way of life. And so if you're not strong, you don't go certain places. You wait until the Lord fortify you. Or if that's not your ministry, then you do the ministry that God has given you, because he knows what he has put in you. So when you go to preach and you go to save sinners, then you have to know the ministry, and he has to appoint you. Don't appoint yourself, because you'll be overtaken by the sin. And so Enoch knew that he didn't want to stay down there long. He just did what he had to do. Then he was back in his closet. He used to see his family, but he knew that his safety was in spiritual things. He knew his safety was walking with the Lord. He says sometimes he hid himself, that no one found him, so he could spend time quietly with God. Sometimes you have to cut off everybody, cut off the telephone, and tell people, leave me, I need to go and spend time with God. And they need to respect that. I used to tell my children, mommy's gone for a few days, and I'd enter my prayer room and that was it, and leave him with the children. My husband with the children, because I'd be like, I need to go and spend time with God. And when I came to Ghana, I would say to my husband, I'm going to go to my room. I'm not coming out for 2 weeks. And I didn't come out for 2 weeks. I would spend 2 weeks in my room. They would just give me food. That was it. Nobody would enter my room. I wouldn't have sex. I wouldn't go outside. I would just be praying and communing with God until I got the infilling, or whatever. I determined that as a child of God, I was going to give God the portion that belonged to him. And even if you're a wife and a mother, you must have time where you set yourself aside for God. Or the cares of this life will take you over. Before you know it, you haven't spoken to God for months, and you're as weak as a kitten.